Thank you, Violet. So good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone. I think many of us are dialing in from many different places around the world. And thank you for being here today. So I will start with introducing myself. I'll be the chair of the session, and then our speakers will introduce themselves as well. And after that, our speakers will be sharing their experience in working in international development. We will have a good amount of Q&A session at the end as well. So if you have any questions, please feel free to type them into the chat. And if you want to specify the speakers, please also do that as well in your question. So let me start by introducing myself. My name is Jirda Petlam. My pronouns is she, her. I just graduated from LSE in gender just last year. I am currently a Gender Equality Social Inclusion Officer for a USAID-funded project on counter-trafficking in person in Thailand. Before this, I worked as a program manager for a USAID-funded project in Southeast Asia and Mongolia, focusing on digital acceleration. Another hat that I've been wearing is that I also co-founded and manage a local collective called Femnimit, where we worked on capturing, systemizing, and communicating gender data in Thailand, especially on gender-based violence. Our donors included the State Department and the Netherlands governments. So please feel free to connect me on LinkedIn as well. Would be really nice to see you all on my LinkedIn. I will hand this over to Maria Jose.
Thank you, Girada. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Maria Jose Guevara. I am from Ecuador. I did my master's in gender and development at LSE on the 2013-2014 cohort. So that was 10 years ago. Time definitely flies by. Right now I'm a research manager at the National Foundation for Educational Research. So I've been working in education for almost 10 years now, since I finished my master's. I've worked both for the government in Ecuador, and also as a consultant in different NGOs and international organizations too. So happy to be here with everyone today.
Dr. Maxi, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you so much, Gerarda. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm so excited that this session is happening. We have so many participants. My name is Maxi. The first thing I need to say is that I'm based in Mozambique. And if you know Sub-Saharan Africa, the internet may not be amazing. So please give me a sign if you can't hear me properly, or if I start to freeze with a very ugly face. Please tell me. I can move somewhere else. I have lots of different networks I can connect to. So I have worked in gender and international development for 20 years now. Yeah, time that you can see my wrinkles, probably. Time's flying, as Maria Jose says. So I have my PhD from the LSE, which I'm not going to tell you when I did this, quite a few years ago now, in international relations, but focusing on ethics in international development. With the case study that I used was gender in development. Asking the question is, what drove the international community to take this issue up from the 70s until present day? Why? What drove this? Anyway, that's my connection to the LSE. Professionally, I have worked mostly as an independent consultant, doing gender-based research, but also developing gender strategies for different kinds of organizations, international NGOs, for example, Oxfam, but also a lot of work with the UN. And in between my consultancies, I was also employed for 3 years for the International Labour Organization. I worked there. I worked for the Tanzania office for 3 years, and also I was employed for UNICEF in Malawi for 1 year. But apart from those 4 years, I've been freelancing, and right now I am doing different types of projects. My biggest project is, like Tirada, for USAID-funded project, where I'm the Gender and Social Inclusion Advisor. And you'll hear a lot more about this, but I think for now, oh yeah, I wanted to say so I'm living in Mozambique. I'm originally Austrian. I am married I have 2 kids, 2 boys who are intended to raise as feminist boys, and 2 dogs. And in my spare time, I like to go running, and I make my own sourdough bread. It's quite recent. So that's me. Nice to meet you all.
Well, I have so many questions already, seems like from both of you. That sounds really awesome. So how about we start the first part of the session by sharing to us how you get into working in development in the first place. What is your starting point? And maybe Dr. Maxi, you could start.
Oh, you can drop the doctor. Thank you. But thank you. Thank you for appreciating this. It was such hard work. You know, so every now and then I appreciate when someone says Dr. Maxi, especially when people refer to me as with my husband's name, which is not my name. That's when I say it's not Mrs. Davies, it's Dr. Ussar. But other than that, I don't use it much. How did I get into international development? I wasn't going to work on international development. I wanted to be a diplomat. And I was more interested in foreign policy. But what really got me interested in this whole area, really, and in social justice, is an experience I had when I was 17. I was in an international school. Maybe you've heard of the United World College. Anyway, we had people from all over the world. It's a sort of very strange little microcosm where you get one person per country at that time. And the war in former Yugoslavia started. And there were attacks on Kosovo. And I remember thinking, you know, it's the poor Kosovans and the evil Serbians. And then I spoke to my Serbian friend, and I got a totally different story. And then I realized how complicated and complex international relations are, international issues are. So that's what drove me into looking more into sort of international relations, international development. And I guess because of my interest in social justice and social issues, I slipped from foreign policy into international development. Very early on in my academic career, I think. Somehow even though I have a background in international relations, all the case studies I ever wanted to use were relating to international development or developing countries. Same for my PhD. My home was the IR department, but I think I was the only one in my year who I was really international development, but using IR theories to apply to international development. So yeah, I think it's this drive for social justice that made me slip into and firmly get stuck in international development. I hope that gives a little bit of an overview. Thank you.
Well, for me, it was a bit of different trajectory. I mean, I started, I think a lot of people who do international development have heard also about the UN model. So I used to do that in high school. But then I always loved reading and writing. So I decided to do journalism for my undergrad. But my university had this liberal arts philosophy that we could still like take different classes from different faculties, and I ended up taking some of the gender classes, some of the international development classes, some IR classes, because I always was interested in like the UN and stuff like that. And after graduation, I did work as a journalist for a bit, both as a newspaper journalist and also for TV a bit. But I think that feeling, that need to be involved with international community and also be kind of involved with things that matter a bit, drove me back to study gender and development especially. And I think I really enjoyed my undergrad gender classes at the university. What was harder was trying to do the move between like having the journalist experience and then trying to work in the development field. So I think first, it's very important to find a topic that you feel passionate about. And for me, that was gender issues, especially in Ecuador 10 years ago. And even nowadays, the gender panorama in Ecuador is it's complicated. Reproductive rights are complicated. Abortion rights are almost non-existent in Ecuador. So it was something that I was always passionate about. And I think that's important. Think about your passion, then think about how you can be involved in that. And for me, that meant like doing a master's in international development, because I obviously did not have the educational background or the experience. And then again, the experience, try to be as involved as possible. You could be a volunteer in small projects. You could be an intern if you have the possibility to be. I would try to recommend you trying to get a paid internship, but we know those are so competitive and so few in international arena. Most of the internships are unpaid. That I think something that needs to change in international development, because not everyone can afford to be an unpaid intern. And then networking, and that also helped. Like studying at LSE, I think it helped quite a bit, trying to get to know people from previous cohorts, and it's something that I was able to do too. And getting mentoring, and something that I think part of that networking, it's also LinkedIn. And when like 10 years ago, they were not as active as it's nowadays, but I think like sending those small messages, trying to connect with people that has similar pathways that you would like to have in the future, it's key. And they can also guide you on how to do things. And it's something that I did. And it helped me to get the connection that I needed, and even recommendations for jobs, because I did not have a lot of experience in development, getting an internship first, and then getting my first job as an analyst for the government in Ecuador. And it was harder because I think 10 years ago in Ecuador, not a lot of people were interested in gender issues. So that's one of the reasons I started working in education, because no one knew really what gender was. So I started telling people that I did my master's in development, but with a focus in gender, tried to flip it around, because people were not really completely, they didn't know what that meant, or they just thought I was like a very angry feminist, which sometimes we are, right? But they think that we hate men and we are just gonna focus on like women issues. But I think that people forget that gender issues are interdisciplinary and intersectional. So it was hard, at least in Ecuador, to start a career in development. And I think that happens a lot in the global south. So we have to also work against the stereotypes that also happen I think, especially in the gender field.
I agree with you. And I think even right now, it's still a bit, our industry is still a bit secretive in terms of, okay, how do you get in? How do you apply? Why so many people in different countries, and what is going on? What's different types of contract? And I think this kind of just basically make this conversation happens in the first place. So yeah, it's still kind of like that, I would say, as an early professional myself. Now, I'm curious to hear about how was your first job like, and how has your career journeys been in international development? How about we start with Dr. Maxi, and then Maria Jose, you can continue.
Thanks, Maria Jose. That was so interesting. I have so much resonates with my thoughts and my experience. How did I get into this? So my first job was for a consulting firm. And it was really, to be honest, this was not the grand design. I did not have my 5, 10, 15-year plan. I knew what certain things made me angry, right? And injustice and inequality makes me angry still to this day. And that's what drives me every single day. But I wanted to get a job, right? And I actually wanted to work for the UN, and I wanted to wear a suit and be very, very serious and be taken very seriously. So I applied for lots and lots of different internships after. So I did my undergrad at Canterbury, and then my master's in international human rights law at SOAS, one straight after the other. So I was 23 when I finished, and I just applied for lots and lots of internships. And I really wanted a big name. I wanted UNs, EU. Didn't get anything. I didn't get what I wanted, but what I did get was an internship for a small private consulting firm based in Brussels, working on lobbying the European Union on development policy. Sounds sort of evil, like evil lobbyists, but it wasn't. It was speaking on behalf of organizations, mostly NGOs, but also UNIFEM at that time, so UN Women Today, that didn't have an office in Brussels, but wanted to influence EU policy and, of course, wanted to get money from the European Union. So I got a job, I got an internship, I stuck actually with this entire thing then for the rest of my career. So it's sometimes you never know where life takes you, right? It was an opportunity, and it was actually very difficult. You know, it was a private firm. It was run by this woman who decided to just hire lots and lots of young people straight out of university. We got paid almost nothing. We didn't get to put our names on anything really. She had her name on everything, but still, I got amazing experience. And already then I had in a way, I was lucky. I got to be a consultant, essentially. And what that means to me still to this day is it means you get to work with lots of different types of organizations. So in my first job, I worked with international NGOs, I worked with the UN, and I worked very much with the European Union, sort of lobbying them. So I got a very diverse experience. I was there for 3 years, doing mainly research, sort of gender analysis of sort of policies. And then also, obviously, lots of speech writing and schmoozing, you know, because you then get these visits that come from New York, and then you have to introduce them and sort of, it was great. It was great to learn how politics works. But I really loved working on gender, and I got to use my theoretical knowledge and really apply it to my work. But I realized, I mean, I always knew actually what I needed to do is get out there. I'm Austrian, born in Austria, and then moved to England. What do I know about international development? Especially what do I know about women in Sub-Saharan Africa? And there I am making all these judgments, all these recommendations, and I don't know what I'm talking about. So I looked for an opportunity to go into the field. And I applied for a JPO program, the Junior Professional Officer program, and I got a place with the International Labour Organization in Tanzania. So that was my first job. I was there for 3 years. And interestingly enough, also, I did not want to package myself as a gender specialist because I wanted to sit at the table. And I knew and then they didn't even have a gender specialist. They had a gender focal point. And that person wasn't invited to the big round table, the shiny one. That's where that's where I wanted to be. So I was like, oh, I do monitoring and evaluation. That's what I do. And a little bit of gender. But of course, after a few months, there was work that nobody was doing on gender. And then I just picked it up and I did it because it was important. So in the end, I started managing an entire project on maternity protection. So it doesn't get more women focused than that. So that's, again, I sort of slipped into this and tried to be at the table still. But I had to really use my elbows to be at the table for that role. For the monitoring and evaluation role, I was always invited. The other role, I had to sort of just happen to be in the meeting room when the meeting was happening. And I do this to this day. So after that, but I didn't enjoy my time at the ILO. I have to say, I felt actually like I was tricked. I was tricked by the world who told me that the UN is this amazing force for good. And I just didn't see it. I saw a lot of bureaucracy. I saw a lot of people driven by the blue passports and the amazing pay and the package and the status. And doesn't it sound so wonderful? You know, I work for the UN. So I didn't see the committed people that I hoped to see at all, actually. So I got really frustrated, and I was barely, not even 30. So I was like, before I go too jaded, too early on, I'm going to stop. And I stopped and I went to do my PhD, which was amazing. I to this day, I'm so grateful that I did this for myself. It's good for my career, but it was more a personal journey, something I just wanted to do. I wanted to stop and think and to know what I'm doing is the right thing. So then during my PhD, I continued consulting for the ILO, and then I got more and more clients, and I've been consulting ever since, basically. And right now, so then I moved to England to do the PhD, and then afterwards my husband followed me. He followed me to Tanzania. No, he followed me to Brussels. He followed me to Tanzania, and then I followed him. No, and then we both went to England, and then he followed me to then I followed him. Anyway, we keep following each other. he took me to Malawi, as he says. I went to Malawi with his job, finished my PhD from there, and got more and more consulting work, which is something that I'm so grateful for, because when you're in the field, but you're an international consultant, you have quite an attractive profile, because people don't have to pay for you to fly in, or at least you're in the region, and also you really know your place. So that since then has really helped me, I think, to establish a solid profile as a gender and development specialist who actually I know what I'm talking about. I know the context. I don't just fly in and on the flight try and look at the map. So I know which country I'm going to. So then from Malawi we moved straight to Mozambique. So here I am currently working. I have multiple projects ongoing. One for UNICEF. I'm working with them actually to restructure their organization. There's one thing I'm going to talk about later, maybe now, that I have two hats. Maybe I'll say this now because it's so important. I've continued to have two hats. I have my gender hat. That is who I am. It's who I am and it's in my blood, but it's how I package myself only for part of the work I do. The other part, I package myself as an organizational development specialist. So I help organizations with their multi-annual strategies, UNICEF's, and they all have their 3, 4, 5-year plans. So I help organizations develop those plans. And I also help them to oftentimes to implement a strategy, you actually need to restructure the way the office is organized if they are serious about this. And so I've slipped into this mostly through professional experience, working with these organizations to then help restructure their teams and really work on their working culture. So if an organization wants to be less sectoral, like I'm talking a lot about UNICEF, I've done so much work with them. They have their education team, their nutrition team, their health team. Children need all of those things, right? So the drive is to be more integrated. I help them develop an integrated strategy, and then I help them develop multi-sectoral teams to actually work together. And the reason why I love this is because I get paid. I can charge a lot more. It's sad. That doesn't make me happy. It actually makes me really sad that I can charge more for the organizational development work. People are willing to pay for this. They're not. They usually raise their eyebrows when I give them my rate for the gender work, but I'm now no longer compromising. This is a professional field and I have a lot of experience, so you got to pay. But I get the raised eyebrows and a quick sort of pause and they swallow, and then most of the time they do say yes in the end. But for the organizational development, you bring it, we will pay. It's management consulting, we pay whatever it takes. But also it's good for my self-esteem, because for my gender work, I really have to fight for my space at the table. And I've done this, like I've been sort of long-term gender advisor on 3 different projects, but I've also done sort of short-term gender strategy development. I don't get to meet with the director of the organization. I meet with the gender officer. When you do your organizational restructuring, I mean, the doors are open. They ask to meet with you. And it's nice sometimes because my elbows are sore. They're bleeding, right? Because I use them all the time. And I don't mind, but it's tiring. And this is something you guys need to be ready for. For this, if you want to work as a gender specialist in international development, you have to remind yourself that you have a right to exist. You are an important member of this team. And one thing I'm going to keep saying, don't apologize for existing, and don't apologize for wanting to be in every meeting, because you need to be in every meeting. But yeah, so a good thing to have those 2 hats, I think, in hindsight. Lucky that I slipped into doing those 2 things. And I'm going to stop talking for now to give Maria Jose the chance to say something. Thank you.
Thank you, Maxi. I think that was very interesting. And the bit when you said that it's very important to fight for your place at the table, I think it's key, and it resonates a lot for us that do a lot of gender work. As I mentioned before, I did my undergrad in journalism, but during the last year, I already knew that it was something that I was not really sure that I wanted to do my whole professional career towards to. So I did some work as an undergrad as a journalist, and I was working in TV network, but I decided to, during my last year of undergrad, I did an internship at the United Nations Volunteer Program, UNB, at the local office in Ecuador while I was finishing my dissertation. And because I kind of knew what I wanted to do as my master's, and I thought that would look great on paper and it would give me a better chance to get on the master that I was aiming. And I knew LSE was a very competitive program, and I needed to have something a bit extra that would differentiate, especially because I didn't have the development background, more like a journalist. Then I got into the program. I went to LSE, and while I was at LSE, I was a volunteer. This organization that it closed nowadays, but at the time it did some work for women in Central America. So it was great to have the opportunity while I was studying and doing that in London. But after that, I went back to Ecuador because I did my LSE master with government scholarship from Ecuador. But it was hard to get, as I mentioned, the job in gender, because I mean, at least even nowadays, a lot of people in Ecuador don't know what gender really is about. So I had this friend that she was applying still. She also did a master's in LSE, but she did it in public policy. And she had some application, and she had two offers, and she was taking one, but on the second offer, they was basically looking for someone who had languages, who spoke was fluent in English and also spoke French, because they were going to start this program with UNESCO and also the OECD. So they needed someone that spoke languages. So and they didn't have that candidate in their pool at the moment. So she passed them my CV, and that's also what I think networking, it's very important. And especially when you're working, just trying to get into the field, who you know, I mean, it's awful to say, but it's very important in the development sector. So I ended up working in education in this government agency that does evaluation and assessment. And they were going to do standardized assessment for like 15-year-olds with the OECD. It's a program called PISA. So it's an assessment, a standardized assessment, and that's how I started working in education, really. But I was working in the research department in this institution. And at that place, I had the opportunity to suggest what kind of research path we could take. So I was, okay, so let's see how girls and boys perform in different standardized assessments, see what impacts their development, how they can improve their grades, and that kind of thing. So I was trying to put a bit of gender and like in the programs that we were developing. So I stayed there for quite a bit, and I had the good opportunity to do some very good career progressions there. I started as a research analyst, then I was a research manager. I ended up being a director of educational research, and I had the very good opportunity to be in like this multi-stakeholder projects with UNESCO, with the OECD, but also other governments, both like in Latin America and also with some governments in the Sub-Saharan area. So once I left that, I started also consulting. And then again, that is great that I was able to get some great networking and contacts during that work. So that, because that's basically how you start. I started consulting both for small foundations in Ecuador, but also like international organizations and also bigger NGOs like the BBOB and CARE and Plan International and also UNESCO for a bit. And after that, again, as Maxine said, we had to put different hats to be a bit more attractive to people that are hiring us and employers. So I after everything, I was like, yeah, I also do some monitoring evaluation that's very sit in the, I think, in international development arena. I do a lot of project management too, because that's also a very like high sick after position, but I am still like a gender and education specialist. I also have done work in school related gender-based violence in Latin America and Sub-Saharan Africa. But again, that's like a subspecialty that you have to put in your CV. So working as an international development specialist, you have to know how to sell yourself, and as Maxi said, how to get a higher rate. And unfortunately, like the gender specialist, it's not really good paid, and that or sick after, it's a lot, not that many vacancies. So sometimes they felt that if there is not a lot of vacancy, they can maybe underpay you, that you will accept as a lower rate. So now I am a research manager, so I do research, I do project management, I do also work in intersectional gender issues, but I work in a foundation in the UK. So I started this work just after COVID, when the work was reopening again. And I think that was a very challenging time also as an international consultant. Very hard to like get work done, because a lot of organizations had a lot of less calls for proposals during that time. So I think that's a summary of like my career so far.
Wow, thank you. I wish I could hear from both of you sooner, because I'm living through the elbowing experience right now, and it's so frustrating. Sometimes you're angry at the how system is, but sometimes you're just angry at your own organization. Uh, and I'm glad that you kind of mentioned about how you package yourself in a different way, because you can be the feminist in the room, but you don't have to have the title as a gender specialist. You could be a manager, you could be a monitoring and evaluation officer, but still kind of just mainstream that gender component throughout everything that you do, basically. So we're gonna move to the Q&A session soon. Before that, I think you gave really solid advice so far, many solid advice. Is there anything else that you want to share in terms of, is there any other advice for young or early level professionals who are exploring or who want to work in gender and development?
Yeah, if I may, I think have a good like soul searching moment with yourself. What is it that really makes your heart beat faster? Where is your passion? And then follow that. And I think that's really important, especially if you want to work in gender. Make sure you don't ever lose that passion. Like every single day you should go to work because you are angry with gender inequality and you want social justice. But as Sharada said, don't let that anger get to you. And I think that's an advice I wanted to give you. I think it's okay to be angry and have that anger give you that little bit of fire that you need to keep going and use those elbows. But obviously first of all, you have to protect yourself. Don't let it get to you. Don't let it make you sick, because then this doesn't help anybody. So to do that, make sure you have your family at hand. And I don't mean, you can have a nice family at home, but what I mean is your community of practice, your fellow feminists. And that's especially if you end up like what I'm doing. I'm the one gender advisor in a project. I'm surrounded by economists who have a different view on life. Or I'm surrounded by biologists who have an even very different view. They think about fish and plants, and I think about people. So have your family there to protect you and to help you. So you don't feel like you need to apologize for existing, because you may feel like that, but know that you have this group of people that can feed you and nurture you, and know that you're right. So I think that's one thing. So, but another thing to think about is if you're thinking about employment, consulting, what is it that you want to do? Especially if you want to become a gender specialist per se, like really work on gender. I find there are few well-paid jobs for gender specialists, like Gerarda said. there tend to be gender specialist positions, tend to be national posts in country offices they tend to be not so well paid, but they're also only open to nationals from that country. So if you're like me, you can't apply. But also those are not the real career positions. You'll hit the ceiling quite soon. After 5-10 years, you will be the oldest gender specialist in the entire country. So if you want to be a gender specialist and really continue on the career path up, and also get paid, because you don't apologize for wanting to get paid for your professional work, consulting is your way. Consulting is the way to do this, because often the interesting work for gender is outsourced. And then your national level gender officer can hire whoever they want, and they can pay them also quite well. And then that's when you get the international consultancies and you develop the UNICEF gender strategy, for example. That strategy is developed by a consultant. So if you want to do this, but also if you like technical work, you like writing and you like outputs, then consulting is your friend. Just wanted to say that. Thanks.
I think it's what you just said, Maxi. It's very important. I think it's the main thing is doing something that you really like. Otherwise, you're going to be desensitized by everything, and you're going to be very aseptic about the work that you do. So you have to like what you're doing. But again, you don't have to let it get to you, because you have to think that, and it's something that's going to happen in development. We try to see our work as being very idealized. We want to change the world. That's what we're doing, the work that we're doing. But again, we get hit like by bureaucracy, by different governments, standards that are happening, the laws that are not helping us progress in the work that we do. So you have to be passionate about it, but also you have to be a bit realistic of what you can do and work in between the limits of the profession. I mean, we want to change everything. We want to do everything better. But again, as Maxi said, I think we have to have a great network of people that support us, not necessarily all of our colleagues in our organization, but people that we have met through our careers, our classmates, and the different educational position that we had. Or I think that's important to create your network, your support system, as in anything in life. I think it's basic. And be persistent. I think that's the key too. Sometimes when I left the government and I was trying to get into consulting, it took so many different proposals to actually land like a consulting opportunity that I was really looking forward to. So be persistent, and that's gonna be hard. It might take a lot of time. I have some friends and colleagues that were sending applications for over a year until they finally got something that they were interested in working on, or even longer, to be honest. But if you really want to do that, be persistent, and maybe like compromise too also in the position. You might want X stuff, but in the meantime, you can do a smaller thing and a different organization and try to build up your CV towards that too.
Wow, that's a really solid advice. Thank you. Now we have a good amount of questions coming through the chat right now. The first one is from Violet. Violet asks, if for both speakers, if you could recommend one or two methodological/technical skills that an aspiring international development and gender student should have to give them a leg up in job applications, what would that be? Anyone, both of you, either Maxi or Maria Jose, anyone want to go first?
Thank you for the question. Is it Violet? Not Violet. Yes, thanks for the question. Well, I think bottom line is it's usually gender and something. Like Maria Jose, gender and education. I didn't mention that I have gender and agriculture is my gender and, or gender and strategic development. But so if you have another thing that you can add to your gender, I mean, I guess it'll depend on the job that you're applying for, but showing that you have experience in whatever that field is, like if it's a gender advisor position on a conservation project, you know, then obviously having skills in conservation, ecology, that helps you. And one thing that's hindered me from getting some assignments is having really strong quantitative research skills. That helps. I'm qualitative and I can get away with it. But I think I could do more if I also had my quants, and especially my SPSS, like all these softwares that I don't have, I didn't do. I managed to dodge it in my entire career. So that's something, if that can help, I think. Thanks.
If it makes sense, perhaps, you know, naming a couple of these softwares, you know, what should students kind of be keeping an eye out for, maybe training modules in these platforms, if there's a particular couple.
So because I've been avoiding them, I can't actually list them. But one thing to know also for the qualitative people out there, and there are also softwares, and some organizations insist on researchers using those. I have forgotten what they're called. I don't even remember the name, let alone having used them. But look out for that, because that's very tangible, and that can set you apart from people like me who don't know.
I think that's a great advice, Maxi. And it happened when I just started working actually in the government, because I was working in the research department. I was working with a statistician and economists all around me. And I was the only qualitative person in the team. And at the beginning, I really struggled a lot because most of the very like quantitative concepts were like completely above my head. And I did have to like learn a lot about that. I started using a bit of SPSS, a bit of Stata. I tried R. For me, it was impossible because you need a lot of program experience with that. But that's some like the software that are like most likely used. And regarding qualitative data analysis, I do use MaxQDA quite a lot in the projects that we work at the foundation. But I also think, and that's something that I'm going to emphasize, I think because something that also gave me my first job, even if it was for the Ecuadorian government, was language skills. And it's one of the harder skills to actually develop, I think, because it takes time. It takes a long time to be fluent in a language. It takes dedication. So I think at least 2, if you can 3 languages that you manage, that would be great for your CV, and it will definitely set you apart from other applicants. And I think that some monitoring and evaluation experience or some kind of courses are great for any field. I mean, gender and yes, but you have to think that most of the projects will always have a monitoring and evaluation component. So we do research, all of us do research. We had to do our dissertations, both undergrad and postgrad. We had to do that, so we have that skill already, but monitoring and evaluation, it's a bit different. So I would recommend maybe doing a course related to monitoring and evaluation. And it will also mean that you might have some small qualitative component on that, quantitative component on that course. So if you try to do like a small course, sometimes they do like a week-long courses in different like monitoring and evaluation methodologies. So that would be great to add to your CV.
Thank you. That was super practical. The next question that I have is a person asks, they have a question on LinkedIn networking. I think, Maria, you mentioned about that earlier. And this person asks, as a professional yourself, what type of message would you like to receive from young professionals? What are you looking to know in the first message?
So to be completely honest, the first message that I sent, and I got a good response when I was just starting to build on my consultancy opportunities, I cold messages someone that was working in UNESCO, and I knew they were looking for a consultant. I sent my CV and I said, what can I improve on my CV so I can be like a better person for that consultancy? That person replied to me, not immediately. They replied to me 2 months after that, but eventually I was able to absorb their advice. So I would say, like, I mean, some people are very afraid of cold messaging people, but sometimes LinkedIn help you looking where you want to be, what you want to do, and just asking for advice. A lot of the messages that I sent were unanswered, but some people do reply. So, and that's the thing. I think that you have a very interesting career trajectory. I would like some advice and why X and C. Maybe I would like to work on this, or if you have any career opportunities too. I mean, sometimes it happens. Sometimes you get a consultancy opportunity out of a cold message in LinkedIn. It happened to me once too. So, I mean, the worst you can do really is not try.
I couldn't agree more. Don't be shy. People can always delete, especially if it's a message. People can delete your message. But what you should say, I think, like Maria Jose said, I think don't ask for a job. Ask for advice or like a chat, you know, because people like me, like I'm very happy to have conversations. And then in these conversations, some opportunities might arise, you know, but yeah, so just don't be too blunt in what you're asking for, and be genuine. Like, do actually reach out to people that you would like to talk to. You don't just want a job from them. You actually would like to know what they have to say. Yeah, I think that, but yeah, don't be shy. I mean, I still get a lot of my work from LinkedIn. But also I remember just meeting people on the train, or like in a hotel over dinner. You know, you just meet people, talk about you and your work, but also purposefully reach out to people. And yeah, 99% of the time, nothing comes of it, but there's this 1%, and that's all you need to get started. There's a couple of other questions. So shall we just sort of answer them in kind of one go, or do you want to do one by one? Because they're sort of linked somewhat. What do you think, Gerarda?
Up to you. We have 8 minutes left. I think next question is specifically for you, Maxi. A person asks, in your experience, how hard is it to get a job without a gender degree?
Yeah, totally possible. I don't have a gender degree. I have it's all international relations, and then human rights law, and then again international relations. I don't have a gender degree, and I don't have a development degree actually. So I think what's most important in answering some of the other questions is skills, yes, you know, softwares and all, but experience. So that answers another question. Also, someone asked, would you just take any job in international development or wait for the amazing one that you, first of all, like with me, the amazing job that I really wanted, I really wasn't that amazing. So don't hold your breath, I think. I would, I mean, don't sell yourself short. If something feels really wrong, don't go for it. But there are opportunities everywhere, and they're hiding in the most unusual, unexpected places. And even if you don't love your job, you might meet somebody through that job that will then give you an opportunity. Better than sitting around. So that was one of my advice that I've written. I prepared a few things. I wanted to say, jump on opportunities, but also look for them, because even if you don't have a gender position in your first job, there'll be opportunities for you to work on gender. Just make sure you keep your eyes open for those, and as soon as something arises, volunteer for it, grab it, take it, and run with it, and then you can build your profile and your experience, and that's going to get you the next job.
I think it's a lot how you sell yourself. Sorry, Maxi, go ahead. I think it's a lot how you sell yourself. When I just started working for the government in Ecuador, they didn't know what gender was. They didn't also really know what development was. So I said, it's kind of like public policy and government. So you have to start somewhere, right? You have to, it might not be the job you were looking for, but you need some kind of experience or your CV to start to get the next job. So you might get like a very, like I did, like a job, entry-level job in education, like education policy, and then say, okay, but I would like to research gender. I would like to do this project. And then, yeah, you have your description that you're like a research analyst, but I've worked in these research projects that are like in the gender this bit and international development this bit. So you can start building up. And I think that at the very beginning, and I'm going to be honest with you, I think it's hard to get into the field. So yeah, Maxi said I mean, definitely don't sell yourself short, but also try to take advantage of every opportunity you have. So if you get an offer that is not the offer or the job you were looking for, maybe try it for a bit, a couple of months, a year, and then that will give you the experience that you need to apply for the next job, to jump into a different field, to get the networking going, the ball going, to move on to the next thing that will give your career a better track of what you're looking for.
Sounds good. We do have a few other questions as well, Maria. Would you like to, just like Maxi, just to go through that, or should I just read them out for you? Because I think many of them kind of have the same theme of, getting into international development, or how do you get into the UN, or the pace
If I
of.
may add something, because I actually forgot this in my career journey, and it speaks to one of the comments here about trying to get an internship for the UN. So, I really wanted an internship for the UN. That was my first big dream, and it didn't happen. What a blessing in disguise, because what I did not know is that a lot of those big institutional internships, they are not actually allowed. The institution is not allowed to hire you at the end of it. They have to let you go for at least 3 to 6 months, and then you can apply for jobs, and then they can hire you. But you can't transition straight from your internship into a job. Totally different in the private sector. And that's what happened to me, because I was employed by this person in this private consulting firm. She could do what she wanted. So that's what happened. I had an internship, and after 6 months, she hired me as a program officer. And the rest is history. And then I had my first job. And that's all you need for your CV, to be able to say that. It doesn't matter how much you get paid, but it's a job. That was my foot in the door. And it was because I didn't get the internship I'd hoped for UN Women, or whatever it was at the time. Thanks.
And I think that here it's important. I see our question saying what would be better to have first, an internship or a job. My recommendation is apply to both and see what happens, because you never know. I mean, I just during COVID, I was really struggling to get consultancy work. I was at this point, I don't know what to do next with my life. I'm going to still apply to more consultancies. I'm going to apply to a permanent position in an organization. And I'm also going to start maybe working on a PhD application, because you can never close any road ahead of you. So that's what I think. And if I have gotten into everything, then it's a different decision, what I really want to do. But I think at first you have to also think about probabilities and how likely are you to get XYZ job or XYZ internship or get into a program. So don't close your roads at the beginning and try to go for everything.
Perhaps I can answer just a few more that are in the chat. Does it matter what your master's was in? To be honest, I don't even remember the title of my master's. So maybe in the very beginning of your career, it matters. Or if it's something really, really specific and you're applying for a highly technical role. But I think it matters more if you go down the academic route. For the jobs that I've applied for, people want to know two things. They want to know, have you got a master's? And they want to know which school you went to. And maybe, is it social science? Is it, because actually, if you look at job descriptions, they usually just say social science or humanities degree, master's level. So I wouldn't worry too much. You definitely haven't closed any doors. If anything, you've opened doors because you're at the LSE, and people love that. So that's great. And you'll soon already have a master's. So I think there's no need to worry about that. I think that will not close any doors for you if you've got, some keywords are not mentioned in your master's title. Unpaid internships, if you can afford it. I don't love it. I think it's exploitation. I wish that didn't happen. Having said that, to be honest, if it's for a small NGO that just doesn't have many funds, and it's going to get you some interesting experience, and you can do some meaningful work and actually help somebody, improve their lives, then go for it if you can afford it. yeah, I think that's for me.
Yeah, with the on-paid internship is the same. I mean, people were saying, the big job that you want is an internship at the UN. I couldn't afford to do an international internship in New York or Paris, but I did like the UN internship at my hometown in Quito in Ecuador. At the time I was still doing my undergrad, I was living with my parents. I could afford it at the time. I really don't like it. I think that people, especially big organizations, can afford paid interns, but to be honest, I think it's sometimes it gives you the experience that you need to get the next job, and it's just the reality of the field. And again, I don't think that the title of your master's really matter after a bit. It just matters that you have the master's and where you did your master's, and that's the end of it, to be honest. And I really enjoyed my time as an LSE. I think I enjoyed the lectures and everything, but most of what I've learned have been on the in-job experience. And at the end of the day, that's the truth. I mean, people are going to look at your CV, see that you check the box of the master's, and then see what else have you done and what other skills you have. So now that you have the degree, what you're going to do with it, it's what's important.
I think we've already approaching the end of the session. For anyone that I wasn't able to cover the question, I'm so sorry for that, but please feel free to connect with our speakers on LinkedIn. I think many of you were talking about how to send a message to people. You can start with us. We would be more than happy to connect with you. So you could continue the conversations from there. Also, Violet, a big shout out for you. Thank you for facilitating this session. And also please say thank you to Catherine from me as well. And many thanks to our speakers. I feel so happy to have both of you here, and super helpful session as well. I wish I could listen to this when I was still studying. Super helpful. So thank you for your time, and thank you for our audience for being here as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Gerarda, and thank you, Maria Jose and Maxi. That was wonderful. And I did record the session. So for any latecomers to this session, I'll put it on our YouTube and I'll email it out to our registrants. So you can watch it later or catch up on parts you missed. Thank you so much. We should probably let everyone go, as I'm sure it's a busy Friday, getting ready for the weekend. And yes, thank you so much. And please do connect with anyone here on LinkedIn if you have any more questions. Okay. Bye. Thank you.
Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Thanks. Bye.